My apologies. Welcome, everyone. We're going to wait a few minutes for individuals to join us before we begin. Hey, welcome again. My name is Lisette Show, and I am part of the member engagement team here at Partners Health Management. Thank you for joining us today for our monthly Partners Member Cafe. It's a safe place for you to voice your concerns and learn more about resources and services. Also joining us from member engagement is Terry Christie, the behind-the-scenes Zoom producer, and Lee Gans, who will be entering important information into the chat for you to copy and paste. Our topics for today are domestic violence and murdered and missing Indigenous women. Before we go on into our session today, let's go over a few housekeeping items. We are offering today's session in closed caption. You will see controls for the feature at the bottom of your screen. You can simply hover over a live transcript to make changes as needed. This meeting is being recorded. Please do not share any personal information during our session. Partner staff is available for individual issues if you want to discuss. We will share contact information for member engagement later in our presentation. The recording of this session will be available on our website at www.partnersbhm.org. Type Member Cafe in the search bar, upper right, for easy location. We will also be sending you a follow-up email with slides and other materials. Let's take a look at the Zoom features located at the bottom of your screen. Chat is open for engagement during our session. Q&A is open for you to answer questions as information is being presented. We will moderate questions at the end. Q&A is open for you to answer questions as information is presented. Reactions are available to send up positive emojis or to raise your hand during the question time, and we will open your mic for questions or comments. At the end of our session today, we will ask you to complete a survey. This information is very important to us. We appreciate you taking a few minutes to complete the survey. Now, I would like to share with you some special highlights about our presenters. First, we have Ms. Pamela Navy Federal, also known as Pam. Pam grew up in Iredell County and attended South Iredell High School. Then she moved on to Mitchell Community College for an associate's in fine arts and music. Pam completed her Bachelor's of Science degree in Human Services with a focus on criminal justice at Gardner-Webb University. Now she's celebrating 40 years in criminal justice system in Iredell County as a past magistrate and past legal assistant in the district attorney's office. She's a former law enforcement officer, 22 years full-time, part-time, and reserve, a past executive director of appropriate placement options. Pam has managed Iredell County's Reporting Center, Resource Center, Reentry Services, and Youth Incentive Program. Pam is specialized in cognitive behavioral intervention, a certified criminal justice addictions professional counselor and facilitator, trainer for survival skills for youth, men, women, and employability skills. Currently, she's a part-time community resource coordinator with the Statesville Police Department. She's been retired from full-time about a year and a half, and total with the SPD for 12 years, and victim services practitioner advocate. She's involved in the crisis intervention team, certified NCIT, certified trainer and facilitator, served with Iredell County team for CIT training, planning, and facilitation. She's involved in domestic violence task force of Iredell, past chair, member of DACI, Drug Alcohol Coalition of Iredell, Local Reentry Council, Executive Committee Chair, Iredell Homeless Collaborative, currently on Iredell County Juvenile Crime Prevention Council, JCPC, past chair, Iredell Homicide Support Group for Survivors, and more. North Carolina Community Alternatives for Youth, past president, secretary, and current North Carolina Piedmont Regional Representative. Reboot, Overcoming Trauma Together for First Responders, Veterans, everyone. Facilitator and mentor for 12-week, 2 hours per week Reboot series. Currently adjunct instructor at Mitchell Community College and Catawba Valley Community College as general instructor in basic law enforcement training. Routinely teaches domestic violence and mental illness, developmental and intellectual disabilities. She currently serves on the board of directors for Fifth Street Ministries, Diaconus Foundation of Hope Ministries Incorporated, and PVAC Piedmont Veterans Assistance Council, Married to Michael Federal and blessed with one son and 2 wonderful grandchildren. Now, our next presenter is Shelby Holland. She is the Tribal Liaison for Partners Health Management. She holds a master's in social work and is a licensed clinical social worker. Shelby is a proud member of the Lumbee Tribe here in North Carolina, who works closely with tribal leaders from all 8 state-recognized tribes to ensure that their members' needs are being met. Her presentation today will focus on the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women, which is a significant crisis impacting Indigenous communities in North America. With no further ado, let's welcome our first presenter, Pam.
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad everyone could join us today. And I am just blessed to be able to share anytime I can about any laws around domestic violence, giving support as a victim advocate around domestic violence. So thank you all with Partners for allowing me to put this information out. And welcome that if anyone wants my PowerPoint, if you folks want to give it over to anyone on the call, that is perfectly fine. The first screen that we flipped by states that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. With that being said, we work all year long, not just in October, to provide services around how to avoid domestic violence situations and the information on what domestic violence really is. So what you see on the screen right now is what the law under 50B defines domestic violence. This is in the state of North Carolina, General Statute 50B. It's the commission of one or more of the following acts upon an aggrieved party. Anytime you see a aggrieved party, that will be the victim, or upon a minor child that resides in the custody of an aggrieved party, by a person whom the aggrieved party has or has had a personal relationship. And it does not include self-defense. Now, this is a lot of words to say that for it to be considered domestic, they have to have that personal connection. We know that violence is violence no matter what it looks like. But for it to be domestic violence under the specific rules and victim advocacy for that, the personal relationship is being defined. Go ahead. The crimes next. The crimes that we deal with on domestic violence, if someone attempts to cause or intentionally causes bodily harm, pay attention. People think that it always has to be a visible sign. This says that if there is an attempt to cause intentional bodily harm in a domestic situation, if they place an aggrieved party, the victim or member of the victim's family or household, in fear of imminent serious bodily injury or continued harassment that will inflict substantial emotional distress. A lot of people just think, again, that it is about physicality, about a physical injury, a physical stance that someone takes against you Domestic violence is much more than that. You see the words in these first two: an attempt, you see inflict substantial emotional distress. Can you see emotional distress on my body? Well, I might show it in my face and I might be downtrodden, but you're not going to physically see a sign of that, or the harassment or the fear. So, domestic violence is more than just the physical. It also includes a rape, sexual offense, or sexual battery, or if a person commits a domestic criminal trespass or stalks a victim of crime. Also, if there is a domestic violence protective order, or if the person has already been charged with an offense, and if there are pretrial release conditions, which mean someone was arrested over the weekend for domestic violence, and their release order to be let out of jail states they must make a $2,000 bond and not harass, threaten, or assault the victim. Those provisions set out in that pretrial release hold valid as a statement to the offender that they are not to do that. And if they violate it prior to the court date, then they are in violation of that pretrial release. You would be surprised how many people we at the police department have charged by people making phone calls to their victim from the very jail that they're sitting in for a domestic battery. And then that comes another charge, or a charge of intimidating a witness when they've been told not to communicate with them. So these are some great laws. Next, please. The next is the personal relationship that must be in a situation for it to be considered domestic. They must be current or former household, current or former spouses. Now, about, 5 years ago or so, 4 or 5 years ago, if it was current or former spouses, we knew that was in North Carolina, spouses of the opposite sex. But now, today, we have laws that do relate to same sex relationships, personal relationships, that first one being one of those. The second element is persons of the opposite sex who live together or have lived together. Next is if they're parents and child. Yes, a parent and a child can have a domestic situation, and that includes substitute parents, can be grandparents, grandchildren. It can be an aunt or an uncle, or someone who has custody or legal guardianship from parent to child. If a couple has a child in common, that is also a part of that. Also, if they're current or former household members, which those could be same-sex relationships as well. And the last one on here is persons of the opposite sex who are in or have been in a dating relationship. And it applies to those who have been romantically involved over a period, but it does not say what that period is. Okay. All right. Next, all victims of all crimes have rights. And this is important for people to understand. The North Carolina General Statute holds these victims' rights as gold, that a victim shall be treated with dignity and respect by the criminal justice system. If you are or know of anyone who is in the criminal justice system and you feel that these things that we're going to go over, there's 9 elements right here that I'm going to go over with you. If you feel that you or someone you know has not been treated with the dignity and respect in the criminal justice system, I, as a victim advocate, would like to know that, and I would like to pursue making things right for you as a victim. So as we look at these, keep that in mind. But the victim's rights show that a victim has the right, upon request, to reasonable, accurate, and timely notice of court proceedings. The right, upon request, to be present at court proceedings of the accused. Now, that's the right. It doesn't mean you have to be. So many situations, the district attorney's office will allow victims to either be at another location or to, be on standby to where they do not have to face the perpetrator all the time, but you have the right to be present in court. You have the right to be reasonably heard at a court proceeding. If there is going to be a plea in the disposition of cases or conviction, sentencing, and release of the accused. The district attorney's office will do what's called a victim impact statement. And they want to know if you have anything else to say privately to them about the situation and concerns for the conviction, sentencing, or release and going forward with those situations. You also have the right as a victim to receive restitution in a reasonable, timely manner when it is ordered by the court, and the right to be given information about the crime, about how the criminal justice system works, about these rights. You will be given a written notice of these rights and the availability of services for victims. All of these 9 victims' rights that we're talking about, let me go on to the next one, please. Hello. Can we go to the next screen? There we go. These are given in written to a victim by our department, police department. If we have a victim, there's a form that has all of the information that we just talked about. It has a copy of these rights. It tells them what their resources are. It tells them about going forward. They're giving a resource guide that is developed here in the county that I'll mention in just a moment. But they also have the right, upon request, to receive information about the conviction or final disposition of the accused. The right to receive notification of an escape or release or proposed pardon or parole of the accused, and a notice or reprieve or commutation of the accused sentence. So if anything happens with the accused, once they've been sentenced, once they're in custody, then the victim will and can get that, can and will get that information. The victim also has the right to present the victim's views in writing to the governor or to an agency considering any action as to the release of the accused prior to it happening. And the victim also has the right to reasonably confer with the district attorney's office. We are blessed in our judicial district here in Iredell. I know that there's other counties here, but in our Iredell Alexander, we have a district attorney's office that is very approachable when it comes to victims' rights. Next, please. So if I were to ask you folks what you think domestic violence is about, many people first say anger, aggression, that it's about somebody who's very angry, that they don't know what their anger is. This is a model that has come out and that shows that domestic violence is much more than anger. It is about power and control, which leads to anger, which leads to aggression, which leads to everything on this cycle. So we know that domestic violence can be physical, what everybody knows, something that leaves a bruise, a strangulation, a hit, a punch, a broken arm, a stabbing, a shooting, from a push or shove to the worst case scenario. That is the physical. It can be sexual. I will make the statement now, and those of you on this call, I'm sure know this already. A person does not have the right to sexually abuse their partner. That is against the law. And a husband does not have that domain, nor a partner or boyfriend, girlfriend, to sexually abuse their partner. So in this cycle of power and control, which makes when a perpetrator and a victim, when something comes to head, and if the victim is going to leave the perpetrator, because of all of these issues around this power and control cycle, you need to realize that this is the most volatile time for a domestic violence victim. Because the victim, how many of you, and again, I'm just asking questions for you to think about, how many of you have ever had a partner, mate, husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, to significant other, to something happen a verbal blow up and somebody hit their fists together or somebody slapped the door or slammed the door, you know, that may be a typical thing in your life, but when it becomes an intimidation factor, I had someone in my life say to me, "You'd rather me hit the wall than your face." And so that was an intimidation by hitting the wall of stating the next thing is going to be your face. So, I laugh inappropriately as we do when we work in this and when we have experience as a survivor of this domestic violence, how these things affect us emotionally. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but I just want you, if you come across anyone in your life, or if you have any of these things going on in your life, please seek assistance, seek consult, talk to a counselor, which my sister's house is through a Fifth Street, has free counseling services if you're in domestic situations. But talk to someone, try to look at these situations and get away from them before that power and control becomes lethal. And so we start at the minimal, but we know that it can escalate quickly to lethal. So intimidation, destroying things, kicking the dog, displaying weapons or verbally threatening a weapon, emotionally putting you down. Your clothes look horrible on you. Your butt's so big. I didn't say that. You're going crazy. Playing mind games, humiliation, making the victim feel guilty about something, even though you may have self-guilt, but you know within your heart that you've really done nothing to be feeling that way. Isolation, controlling who you talk to, who you see, what you read, what's going on. Well, I wouldn't be jealous over you if you didn't act this way. I like it when I do some education with some youth, and I love the look. I've got the kids raising their hands, to this, to that. Hey, do you know anybody in your world that's this? And then I say, do you know anybody in your life that has a cell phone and they have somebody that grabs the cell phone out of their hand and say, who are you talking to? Why are you talking to them? What's going on? I tell adults, if you're in a relationship that you are so intuitive as to your partner's cell phone, uh, internet, whatever they're doing, I'm going to tell you that there's a bigger problem going on than you seeing their phone or their internet or their computer or whatever. To work on that, because then in that lies a distrust. From the distrust becomes that power and control of whatever's going on. Just be mindful of those types of things, that the jealousy and the distrust can raise this to elements beyond control quickly. You may have someone that minimizes or blames you, making light of it. It's never going to happen again. If you hadn't have said this to me, I wouldn't have blown up. Hey, don't put the children in it. If you do this or charge me, I'm going to take the children away from you. I don't want you going to work. I don't like you working around men. I'll give you money, $40 every week. There's people still in our society today, ladies and gentlemen, on this call that are controlled by their partner, as this power and control looks at. Male privilege, acting like the master of the castle, defining the roles between the husband and the wife, and coercion. We have a lot of these coercion factors with some of our Latino population, to where some that are going through trying to become legal in our community. We've had several things where they report, hey, you smoke weed. I'm going to report that. I'm going to get you in trouble with this. I'm going to, tell them that you're doing these things illegally. One thing that I hear so many times from the victims, well, he said he was going to kill himself. He said he couldn't live without me. And if I left him, he was going to kill himself and I wasn't going to let it be on me. I promise you, to everyone listening to my voice, if someone makes that choice in their life, it is not your fault. It is not your fault. Pay attention to that power and control. Next slide, please. The cycle of violence is real. And I survived a domestic situation years ago. And I'll tell you that I love the honeymoon and the makeup phase best of all. I got some gorgeous diamond earrings and a wonderful cruise out of the makeup phase, and I let the rest of it go. I make light of it because I am a survivor. I'm no longer a victim. And my battering was my hopeless, helpless feeling. I was only physically touched one time in an abusive stance, but I was emotionally distraught, had clinical depression for a couple of years. The woman that you see today with the strength in me was nothing but a shell of that during my domestic years of walking on eggshells, keeping the batterer calm, not doing anything that I wanted to do just to try to keep peace, to be so critically held back in my communication because I didn't want to escalate that. But the honeymoon phase was the best, and that's what I lived for. And then there might be a cycle where it says the calm phase might be absent for a short period of time. But the longer that you are in that emotional cycle of the battering or the angry threats or the controlling behaviors, the more that happens, the closer the time in between the breaks. So it is realistically a cycle of violence. There is help for this, folks, if anyone wants to get help and are in those phases of their life. Next, please. So I've already touched on, just go ahead and click that a couple of times for the, yes, go ahead. Yeah, that's it. So the physical, we know what that is. The emotional is anything that attacks your sense of worth. And the sexual is forcing the partner to engage in a sexual act that you do not want to. It says her, it says he or she, but most of the laws historically have been written as the assault on a female because females were the ones that came forward most historically over the years of being abused by a male partner. However, today laws have changed on the domestic violence assaults and things that we have. I'm not going to say just as many, but we do have men who are more actively reporting abuse in their situations. Stalking is another part of definition involved with domestic violence, which is the pattern of harassing or threatening used by the perpetrator that is both unwanted and causes fear. Next, please. Our department, as well as I know that Mooresville Police Department does a lethality assessment. It's an assessment that the North Carolina Coalition Against Domestic Violence has put out information with support of the North Carolina Department of Justice to look at what's called lethality assessment protocol. It was created in Maryland, the Network Against Domestic Violence. It's designed to prevent intimate partner homicides or serious abuse with high-risk victims and connecting those victims to safety resources. That stat up top says that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced some form of intimate partner violence. And then it gives North Carolina specific that 35.2% of women and 30.3% of men experience domestic violence or stalking in their lifetime. Next screen, please. So this screen is the actual lethality assessment. I'm sorry, it's a little fuzzy. That is on me. I realized that after I had sent it in. But there's 11 simple questions that are asked when our officers go out to a domestic call. They will ask the victim these questions. If the victim answers yes to any 3 questions, it automatically triggers a referral. And the referral goes to my sister's house, which is our domestic violence shelter here. And they talk immediately while the officer is on scene with them. They talk immediately to a counselor there that talks through this and helps to set a safety plan. And it may be a determination made that we immediately are going, if my sister's house does not have a bed space available, if the person hasn't been arrested, then it may be that we look for another shelter outside of our area, or it may be that we put her up in a hotel that he doesn't know about for a night or two for the victim and or the victim's children. So there's many resources that we have that we can do. But once this lethality assessment is done, and if the woman assesses to be at a risk for lethality, we do something immediately for her and with her or him to get them to safety to the next step. Every month, the Domestic Violence Task Force of Iredell meets. It's welcome to anyone. We have had folks from other counties come and visit our task force meeting. On our meeting, you can go to the next screen, please. Our task force was formed in 2012 with the support of Governor's Crime Commission dollars, and we continue that today as we, Statesville Police Department and Mooresville Police Department both still get dollars to fund domestic violence investigators and to support the Domestic Violence Task Force. We historically have had over 60 various agencies come together through the courts, the criminal justice agencies, communities, and nonprofits. And I want to read the goals. You know, the goal of this, it may seem quite simple, but coming together for these goals makes a difference in the lives of our victims. To increase awareness of domestic violence in our community, increase coordination and efficiency of responses with partnering agencies, improve access to victim services, increase the offender accountability to reduce recidivism, along with reducing the exposure of domestic violence to children. We meet on the third Wednesday of every month at the Agricultural Center in Statesville, and we meet from 12:30 to 1:30. Sometimes if we go over, we'll let you know, or if we have a special guest. And the DV Task Force Chair for this year is Thomasina Douglas. We, in this task force, you can go ahead to the next screen. In what we do there, we support My Sister's House services that I've talked about. My Sister's House is a program of Fifth Street / Diakonos, and it is the 24-hour crisis line, a safe shelter for women and children, victim advocacy. She's put that in the chat. Good, thank you. Counseling and support services, safety planning, and community education. Next slide, please. Their stats for 23-24, they're not at the end of the 24-25 year yet. So we have the latest stats here that they served. They had 136 different guests served at the facility for 7,419 nights. They had over 600 crisis calls and 327 advocacy calls, 290 temporary ex parte orders with 110 granted, 26 denied, 37 continued, 27 set for hearing, and 90 withdrawn. And that would have been withdrawn by the victim. 190 counseling clients and 1,536 counseling sessions. As you can see, these numbers are high. I want you to know that domestic violence still remains the number one highest single call for service for the Statesville Police Department for disturbance and domestic disturbance. So it's important that we talk about this, that we're open about it, that we let folks know. We do have domestic violence resource guides, which I don't know what it's going to look like when I hold it up, but I'm going to try to get it in the screen. It looks like this on the front. You can't see it, but you can go. We have like 8,000 of these in boxes that we would like to give out to anyone that needs it. And feel free to reach out to me. This 704-902 is my cell. The crisis line for My Sister's House is listed. And of course, emergency 911. And to end this, if there's any questions or any comments or suggestions, the last slide, please, is that our ultimate goal is to stop the violence before it happens. So someone asked, What is the reasoning for it being denied? A reason that it might be denied is if there wasn't enough probable cause determined when it goes before the judge. I can't be specific. I will tell you that I have never been in court when one was denied, but I have heard. And sometimes, just sometimes, a victim has already been threatened and won't come forward and say that she has been threatened. And she refuses to give any more information to the court. And that is when it may make it to court but be denied because they don't follow through. That's why we encourage victims that we're here to support you as a community collaborative group. And, we want to walk with you through this process.
So we will take questions at the end. We'll let Shelby go on and do her presentation, and then we will collect all the questions and I will moderate them at the end and send them to the appropriate subject matter expert. So Shelby,
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. And Shelby, take it away.
Thanks, Beth. Hi, everyone, and thank you, Member Cafe, for the opportunity, as always, to be here and present on something that is so near and dear to me. As previously mentioned, I am an enrolled member of the Lumbee tribe here in North Carolina. We are the largest tribe east of the Mississippi River. The topic that I'm going to be speaking on today is murdered and missing Indigenous women. It is a heavy topic. Sorry, could you go back? It is a super heavy topic to myself, and if you find yourself feeling that way as well, my contact information is at the end of the presentation. I would love to talk more on how to work through some of these feelings that might come up. For today, we will be addressing a few items. What is murdered and missing Indigenous women? Where it came from? Why is it in place? Who is it impacted? What is currently being done to help? And where you can find more information if you'd like to know more. And for the sake of my tongue tying every other sentence, I am going to be using the acronym MMIW. So just know that that stands for Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women. You might also hear similar names like Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls, Murdered and Missing Indigenous People, Murdered and Missing Indigenous Relatives, but it is all for the same cause. Terry, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So what is MMIW? MMIW is a grassroots movement created in September of 2016 by Canada's Prime Minister to bring awareness to the women and girls in the Indigenous populations that are being murdered and or are going missing. It was created due to the disproportionate amount of violence against Indigenous women in Canada and in the United States. That second bullet there just kind of talks about how the Prime Minister of Canada realized that they're in a national crisis because of a study that was presented. The data showed that from 2001 to 2015, homicide rates for Indigenous women in Canada was almost 6 times higher than that for any other women. MMIW started to gain traction in the US because of similar rates, but I'll get into the rates a little bit later on. Before we move on to the next slide, I wanted to explain the picture that you're seeing on the right. It's really important. The symbol for the movement is typically a red handprint over the mouth. Red is an important color. That's why I'm wearing it today for the movement, because in my culture, red is thought to be a color that transcends the physical world with the spiritual world. So basically being able to talk to those who have passed away. Outside of my culture, red can be a symbol of blood or murder. So the color choice was very intentional and a way that we could include our own beliefs and get the attention of others. The reason for the hand over the mouth is because it symbolizes that we will no longer be silenced or pushed to the side on this issue. Terry, we can go to the next slide. MMIW National Awareness Day is May 5th. That's one of the reasons we chose this topic to present on for this month's Member Cafe. The Awareness Day was created in observance for Hannah Harris's birthday. Hannah Harris was a tribal member of the Northern Cheyenne tribe. She disappeared when she was 21 years old on July 4th. She decided to leave her reservation to go watch an Independence Day firework celebration and unfortunately never returned home. Her family immediately reported her missing, but unfortunately, local law enforcement did not act as quickly as the family would have liked them to. So because of this, her family decided to organize a volunteer search team. The search team scoured the area for 4 days straight, and on the 4th day, the volunteer search team did find her body. She had been horrifically beaten to death and sexually assaulted. So for her loved ones to have found her in that state, it was a pretty traumatic scene. This instance got so much press that it was declared that May 5th, her birthday, and a day that should have been a celebration of life, instead would become a rallying call for justice. But on positive news, former President Joe Biden actually signed a proclamation in 2022 stating that moving forward, May 5th will be recognized as MMIW Awareness Day on an annual basis. Some ways that Indigenous people and families observe or show support for this day are by wearing red, attending rallies, and going to other community events, kind of like this one. Families that have been directly impacted, sometimes they'll host a dinner and leave an empty chair for the loved one that is missing and or was murdered. Some ways that MMIW will raise awareness through are by organizing marches, and something that's really important is building databases to capture the accurate numbers of MMIW. Keyword is accurate, which I'm going to get into a little bit later on, but MMIW, they hold local, community, city council, and tribal council meetings to address these issues. There's also trainings and informational sessions for police and domestic violence advocates. Activists and journalists in and outside of the Indigenous communities in the US and Canada have been fighting to bring awareness to the connection between sex trafficking, sexual harassment, sexual assault, and the women who go missing and or are murdered. Terry, we can go to the next slide. So here's 2 examples of some outward support. That picture on the left is from the National Museum of American Indians, intended to draw attention to violent crimes against Indigenous women. This display is very intentional. You have the dresses to signify women, and the red is to signify they're passing on. Like I mentioned, red means in my culture. This is a big statement by the museum and a harsh reminder of the realities. The second picture is Secretary Deb Haaland. She is in her office at the Department of the Interior. She is seen draping a red shawl in an empty chair in her office to honor MMIW National Awareness Day. She was quoted on this day that the picture was taken, and she stated, quote, "Everyone deserves to feel safe in their communities, but the murdered and missing Indigenous peoples crisis is one that Native communities have faced since the dawn of colonization," end quote. She is the first Native person to serve in a presidential cabinet, so having her publicly raise awareness at such a high level and to have her voice in such important rooms, it's really hopeful that it's going to make an impact. Terry, we can go to the next slide. So here's some tough stuff. If you have ever attended a presentation that I have done, you know that I will always include data. I find that the data piece really paints a clear picture and shows how real these issues are. So when we were talking about abuse, I went ahead and broke it down into physical and sexual. 27% of non-Native women will experience physical abuse in their lifetime. However, that number jumps up to 56.1% when we are looking at the data for Native women. If we jump down to sexual abuse, you can see that 25% of non-Native women versus 31% of Native women will experience sexual abuse in their lifetime. Those last 2 bullet points state that 70% of assaults go unreported in the Native American community. And of the 30% that are reported, 67% of those are non-Indigenous perpetrators. Most people always ask the obvious question here, why are these the statistics? And I wish I had time to get into it today, but if you are interested, I saw that Lee was able to put it into the chat. You can go to the tribal webpage on Partners website. I have a few trainings that are recorded and posted there and definitely go into more detail. Terry, we can go to the next slide. This is another slide with some data. Murder is the third leading cause of death in the Native American community. Native American women and girls are murdered at a rate 10 times higher than all other ethnicities. And Native American women are more likely to be killed by an intimate partner than by anyone else. Now, earlier on, I mentioned the keyword accurate data for MMIW. In 2016, the National Crime Information Center reported that there were 5,712 murdered and missing Indigenous women in the U.S. However, the Department of Justice only reported 116. That is a huge, disappointing discrepancy. And because of that discrepancy, we have Savannah's Act. We can go to the next slide. Savannah's Act became law on October 10th, 2020. The bill is named after Savannah LaFontaine Graywind. She was a member of the Spirit Lake Nation of North Dakota. She was unfortunately found murdered when she was 22 years old and was 8 months pregnant. As you can imagine, this gained a lot of traction in the Native American community, which eventually led to this bill being passed 3 years after her death. The act aims to improve data collection of missing and murdered Native Americans. It also aims to clarify the responsibilities between tribal, federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies that are going to be responding to cases of missing or murdered Native Americans. On the previous slide, I showed you guys the discrepancies of the Department of Justice. So because of that, Savannah's Act also directs the Department of Justice to review, revise, develop certain law enforcement protocols to address murdered and missing Native Americans. The Act also ensures that law enforcement agencies be trained to put tribal affiliation in their federal databases. They also require outreach to tribes, tribal organizations, and urban Indian organizations. And the Act requires public reporting of missing and murdered Indigenous women, men, people, relatives, etc. The hope with this Act is that all these efforts will we will begin to have a better understanding of why Native Americans are missing or murdered at such a disproportionate rate and be able to come up with an action plan to address the violence. Terry, we can go to the next slide. Here are some events that were local to North Carolina for the National Day of Awareness for MMIW. They have already passed, but just kind of keep these in mind for next year. On the left is an event that UNC Wilmington hosted on April 29th. It was their 6th annual recognition. It began at 4 p.m. with a warm welcome, and at 4:30 they watched a documentary, and they had a Q&A with the director of the MMIW North Carolina Coalition. There was a spoken word of poetry and a candlelight vigil to follow. On the right, there is an event that the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians held in Cherokee on May 3rd. It was also their 6th annual event. This event was like, it was a remembrance walk that began at 3 p.m. and ended around 5:30. They also offered it as a virtual event. So for those who weren't able to make it or don't live in the area, they could still participate as well. I think about 4 or 5 tribes located here in North Carolina hosted their own memorial or event. So if this is something that you're interested in supporting or you want to be a part of next year, events are typically held right at the beginning of May. You can honestly just do a quick Google search of MMIW events in North Carolina, and there should be options for you there. We can go to the next slide. I know that this was a general overview of the movement, but if you are interested in learning more, I've put some options here on the screen depending on how you like to get your information. There are shows, movies, podcasts, all dedicated to this particular movement. I did want to note, I highlighted the We Are Resilient podcast. That's because that was a podcast started here in North Carolina by the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. And I put the picture of their logo there just to kind of show you what the logo looks like if you go searching. I've listened to it before, and they have structured the podcast to be very similar to other true crime podcasts. So if you are a true crime fan, I definitely recommend checking it out. Next slide. And lastly, if you have any questions or comments, or if you need to follow up with me on some of this heavy stuff, here is my contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me. Don't hesitate. And as always, thank you, Member Engagement, for having me today.
Thank you, Shelby. I'm gonna move on to some questions that we have and comments. If you think of anything while we're going through the rest of the time we have together and want to ask a question, please feel free to put it in the Q&A. Or you can raise your hand and we can unmute your audio. So the first question we have, and I'm going to direct this to Pam. Can you help one of our listeners? It says, I have a family member that has been living with emotional abuse for years. What can I do to encourage her to leave?
That's a great question. And my recommendation would be for the person that's asking the question to help connect the one who is struggling with the community partners that can help her. She can gain strength from even doing things like attending a DV meeting and speaking with other survivors, to reach out to my sister's house. Everything they do is confidential. You do not have to be a client needing shelter for sexual abuse or domestic violence. If you are just living with it, you can let them know and they will serve you. But I think it's all important, because if this one person says it's her family member and knows that she's going through that emotional distress, through the, emotional abuse, then there's other people that know it. And so gain the strength from those that will support her through it, which if it's in this county or another county, as far as if they're a victim, our folks will talk to any victim of domestic violence. But I just recommend getting a strong base that can support through a process if she does choose to leave. In our domestic violence resource guide, which it can be found on our City of Statesville website, it lists a safety plan where you can, look at the facts things you need to have in place for a safety plan if you're seeking to get away from that situation. And I'd be glad to talk to anybody privately about that.
Thank you, Pam. We'll probably look that up and send that out with our follow-up email. Next question I'm going to direct to Shelby. Can you tell us how to learn more about the Lumbee tribe?
Good question. You can, if you are super interested, you can go to www.lumbeetribe.com. On that website, you can read on our culture, our traditions, and our history. They also have services and news, like recent news listed. There's also a Facebook page that you could follow with all events and upcoming powwows and different opportunities. Good question. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelby. I'm going to encourage anybody else to submit their questions through the Q&A or raise your hand and we will unmute you.
Beth, I did see one question, I think in the chat that somebody had put in there about serving only one spouse. I know that when it comes to the district attorney's office, if a person has a legitimate criminal issue, and they go and they get a warrant, I guess the short of the long is victim services would not work with both of them together if they both were victims. They would not work with a perpetrator and a victim, say an assault occurred last week. You know, they would not do any services together. I don't know that I totally understood the question, but it said that they asked if we would serve both the spouse and the victim. If the spouse is a victim, then the spouse has every right, you know, for all rights of a victim. But no, they would not be. We do not do much like no moderation mediation of the victim and the spouse or the offender together. I don't know what the exact question was, you know, what they were looking for, but the answer is no. You know, we will serve them separately.
Thank you, Pam. Okay, we have, I guess, oh, I thought we had a hand raised. So any last questions before we wrap up for today? All right, Lee, okay.
Hey Beth, could I just jump in really quick? I wanted to thank my co-speaker, Pam. I think you did an amazing job, very heartfelt. Commend you for everything you've been through. I caught myself tearing up while you were talking, and I'm really appreciative of just being able to sit on this panel with you. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. And Shelby, I have some Lumbee roots I want to talk to you about.
Of course.
Okay, we do have one last question. Is there a national site for domestic violence to find resources?
Absolutely. And I will send it or put it in the chat.
Thank you, Pam. All right, Lisette, I'm going to send it back over to you to wrap us up.
Absolutely. So, want to be in the know? Stay connected. Join our email news. Grab your phone, open your camera, and hover over the QR code, and then click on the link or copy and paste the link from the chat. Enter your information in the subscribe and select what type of news you want to receive. And excuse me. Your feedback is important to us. It helps us to plan for future sessions and learn what topics interest you. Please take just a moment, only 4 to 5 minutes, to complete our survey. Grab your phone, open your camera, and hover over the QR code, and then click the link. Questions and comments. Again, thank you for attending Member Cafe today and for sharing your time with us. As I mentioned at the beginning of our session, we have partner staff available for individual issues you may want to discuss. You can reach the member engagement team by sending your email at memberquestions@partnersbhm.org. We look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for joining us.